Welcome to StreetGangs.com, and right now I'm standing on the 800 block of East 76th Street. This is the house that Raymond Washington was living in when he started the Crips back in around 1969. Raymond Washington from this house spread that Crip philosophy to Compton, to the West Side, to Watts, and to all over Los Angeles. But today I want to know which are currently the 10 oldest Crip gangs in Los Angeles.
When you gon' join the gang?
Block Crip, Underground Crip, and Neighborhood Crip. Historically, it's very difficult to say which one of these gangs started before the other. We're talking about within a week, some people say within days of each other. So because all these neighborhoods pretty much started around the same time, I'm going to group those neighborhoods together as one ranking. Back in the early 1970s, this high school was ground zero for West Side Crippin'. This was the school that Tookie went to and all the West Side Crips of the time attended. But sometime around 1972-73, some of those original West Side Crip members decided to start off their own Crip gangs. It was on 113th Street that original West Side Crip members decided to start Block Crip. This goes back to the 70s. It just says B Crip, B/Crip for Block Crip, and then it just says Crip and Cuz. So right here, you have Ed Dog, and you have West Side Block. And then underneath Ed Dog's name, 113. Block is spelled B-L-O-C-K. So that's how you know this is really old, to see the word block spelled B-L-O-C-K, with the CK really meaning Crip killer, which Crips don't write CK on any word. We're in an underground Crip neighborhood. It was actually a spinoff from the original West Side Crips here in Los Angeles. They were founded around 1972-73, and they've been here for about 40 years. And today they got 3 cliques, 103rd, 105th, and 107th Street. Back in the day, this street here, 105th Street, was turned into a one-way by the LA County Sheriff's Department, who felt that this would impede drug activity and gang activity. And for years, the Century Division of the Sheriff's Department was known as the most notorious, the most corrupt of the different LA County Sheriff's Departments. But the gang is still here, the gang is still active, and the one-way street probably did very little to limit or reduce the activity of the street gang. I'm standing at 11239 Southwestern Avenue, right off the corner of Western and Imperial. This was the site of the Rio Theater. And the Rio Theater is important historically because it's the place where original East Side Crips and West Side Crips came together and created the Crip consolidation in the very early 1970s. But then when the Crip gang started to splinter apart, one of the Crip gangs that came up out of that was called Neighborhood Block Crip, which is the neighborhood right here behind this Burger King. I'm standing on Imperial and Wilton. To my left, one block is 115th, and that's where the original Neighborhood Crips got their name from, 115th. And then just to my right on the other side of the Imperial Highway, the 111 Neighborhood Crips began. They called themselves Neighborhood Block Crip. And then somehow in the late 70s, they dropped the block and just came Neighborhood Crip. All the gangs over here between Century and Imperial are part of the Rolling Hundreds Crip car, with the exception of the Hoovers. And that came out many years later. But this is one of the oldest gangs that was a spinoff of the West Side Crips in the early 1970s. I'm standing on 70th and San Pedro Street in South Los Angeles, and this is home to the 6'9" East Coast Crips. And back in the early 1970s, there was a neighborhood here called the Shack Boys. And the Shack Boys became the 6'9" Shack Boys, and then the 6'9" Shack Boys became the 6'9" East Coast Crips. And to a certain degree, they kept that Shack Boy identity. It's still basically the same neighborhood. In fact, there were 2 Shack Boy neighborhoods. There was one on 76th and Hooper, and there was the one here. The 76th and Hooper East Coast Shack Boys are pretty much, I would say, defunct. If you go there today, you see mostly F13, Florencia 13, gang graffiti and gang members walking around. And within the last 15 years, those two gangs have been clashing. This is a recent slab of graffiti. It's not one of these old historical slabs. This is less than 10 years old. But you can see F13, and it's crossed out, most likely by someone from East Coast. And that's just representative of the conflict between those two neighborhoods. 69 Street, right here on the corner, on the southeast corner of 69th and San Pedro. You see the 69 STR. We're standing on 69th and Main Street in East Coast Crip neighborhood, and over my shoulder is a vacant lot. And there used to be an apartment building there where the city attorney argued that there were many East Coast Crip gang members that lived in the apartment building and were involved in criminal activity. So the city attorney's office secured a landmark ruling that evicted every single tenant of the apartment building, not just the gang members and the gang members' family, but every tenant. And this was back in 2004. Then 3 years later, they decided to demolish the entire complex so that they can bring new housing and construct new properties with gang prevention and intervention as part of the process. And we're still waiting for the city attorney's office to fulfill their promise of building new homes here and new housing for the people in the community. All right, I'm on Zamora Street here in Watts, California, in the heart of Hat Gang Crip neighborhood. They were actually known as the Hat Boys in the early 1970s, but then eventually they adapted the Crip identity. Their turf actually goes from 98th to my left to 92nd Street to my right, and it actually crosses into two different jurisdictions. On the side that I'm standing on, this is the city of LA, but when you get to 92nd Street, you're in the county of LA, Firestone, Florence area, and they have two cliques, 92nd Street and 96th Street, and we are currently standing on DWP land. In fact, a big section of Hat Gang Crips neighborhood, which is already a small turf, is owned by DWP. And for many years, 96th Street had a bunch of rundown, dilapidated homes. And in the 1990s, the city of Los Angeles influenced some contractors to come in here, and they renovated this entire block. You can tell all these homes have the same style, cookie cutter shape. This was an improvement of what was here in the 1980s and 1990s. But we're standing right here on the corner in Watts, and it just looks like a completely different part of Los Angeles. A part of Los Angeles that is neglected, a part of Los Angeles that looks like it's in despair. This building behind me looks like it was once a small market that served the community, and it looks like it hasn't been opened in who knows how long. And then over here, you have an alley, and it's difficult for the traffic to drive through. You got a couch that was dumped here, a bunch of furniture, an old television, and you can just tell that there's just absolutely no resources, and it doesn't seem like any financial incentive by the city of LA to even invest in this community. There's absolutely nothing around here except just a bunch of old homes, trash on the streets, vacant lots, abandoned buildings. This is what living is like over here in this part of Watts. We're standing on the corner of Central and Manchester in Kitchen Crip neighborhood. In fact, this is where Manchester turns into Firestone. For many years, I've always wondered, why did this gang call itself Kitchen? Most gangs select a name that's tied to the geography, that's tied to the neighborhood, whether it's a street or an intersection or a park. And for years, I thought that this was one of those gangs that didn't select a name that was tied to the neighborhood, but I was wrong, because in the early 1970s, there was a liquor store here called Kitchen Liquor. I'm standing on Central Avenue in Kitchen Crip neighborhood, and I just found this interesting graffiti that shows the history of conflict between the Kitchen Crips and the family Swan Bloods, right here on pretty much the border between those two gangs. FSB's family Swan Blood crossed out by the Kitchen Crips, and then right here you see KC for Kitchen Crip, and then the Kitchen Crips wrote again KCG, and it's crossed out. And what's unique about this neighborhood, Q102, is that it actually stretches over 2 jurisdictions. On the west side of the neighborhood, you're in the city of Los Angeles. And on the east side of its neighborhood, you're in Firestone or Florence, which is unincorporated LA County. So because of that, it's patrolled by two different policing agencies. You have the LAPD on one side and the LA County Sheriffs on the other side. This neighborhood has went from majority black to majority Hispanic. And usually when you think about Hispanic immigration, you think about Mexicans coming into the United States, but this is an area where Central Americans have been migrating in for the last 10 years. Even commercially, there's been a shift. There's a lot of businesses, small businesses and markets that are catering to the Hispanic community, such as this ranch market behind me. We see gangs actually disintegrate and fade away, not because one neighborhood took over another neighborhood or not because they lost a gang fight, but it's usually demographic change that brings a gang to its end. And Q102 probably has less than a decade left to survive. So I'm on Town Ave and 102nd Street in South Los Angeles, and this is the birthplace for Q102 East Coast Crip. Now back in the days, they were just known as Town 102 or Q102 Town, and then eventually they put the East Coast Crip on it. But around 1971 is when the guys from this neighborhood started, and it is the oldest of all the East Coast Crip gangs, and it is one of the oldest Crip gangs in Los Angeles. Q102 East Coast Crip. But in geography, it is actually not that big. It only goes from Century to the north to about 103rd to the south between Avalon and San Pedro. Very small neighborhood, very small gang, but it's been here for 40 plus years, and it's just proof that it doesn't matter how big you are geographically. If the neighborhood is a tight-knit neighborhood, and of course if the population demographics continue to serve it, it doesn't matter how small a gang is, it's going to continue to exist as Q102 has existed for now 40 plus years. We're on Town Ave between 102nd and 101st Street, and I just noticed this Q102 East Coast Crip graffiti. Even though it doesn't say Q102, I know it's Q102 because it's got Baby Hitman's name. And if you guys recall, we interviewed Big Hitman, and he talked about his little brothers following him into the gang, Little Hitman and Baby Hitman. And then to the right side, it gives you the whole list of all the East Coast Crip gangs, from 1st Street to 190. And those are all the different East Coast Crip sets, and Q102 is within that 1st to 190. This is specific to Q102. So we got the Q102 right here in the middle, and it just so happens we're out here on Q102 Day, October 2nd, 2015, and that represents 10-2 for Q102. And then to the left, you see 6-9 East Coast and then 9-7 East Coast. But this was written by someone from Q102, and you see right there, Happy Q102 Day. You just saw part 1 of the oldest Crip gangs in Los Angeles, but don't go away. Part 2 is coming up real soon. This is a gang that formed on the east side of the Los Angeles River. And this is the first gang that was predominantly Mexican during its early years. This is some real interesting Lincoln Heights concrete graffiti. It looks like it goes back to the 70s based on the style of letters.